Hey man, how you doing now? Gotta get this train running. Good evening and welcome to the February meeting of the Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Commission. I believe we have a quorum. We do have a quorum. The first order of business is for a moment of silence. Let us quiet our hearts and minds, center ourselves on the work that we have been brought together to do today. Thank you. Are there any individuals from the public who are online or have signed up who would like to make comment before we during the public comment portion? Seeing none. Okay, the first action item, we have the minutes of the January 12th meeting. They've been previously circulated. Motion to approve.
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve, but I do think we might want to make one change at the bottom of the first page where it talks about you co-chair said that we needed to circulate the job description for the position. I think that's supposed to be hearth manager,
That's correct.
right? And so that word appears 2 other times, I think.
Okay. Are there additional corrections? Motion by Carol, seconded by Jason to approve the minutes with necessary corrections for the meeting of the 12th. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by the same. Any abstentions? So ordered. We do have to see on the agenda. Next item is a presentation from the Director of Procedural Justice and Research for the City of Charleston's Police Department, Jillian Edison. Jillian came on board just about the same time that Adrian did. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and delighted to meet you all. I hope to be working with you in the future. I am here at Adrian Swinton's request to talk to you a little bit about a webinar that the Charleston Police Department, in conjunction with the Citizens Police Advisory Council, will be hosting on the topic of motor vehicle stops. And this came about because the council selected this topic for us to talk about in hopes of educating the community about traffic stops so they could hopefully be more at ease and know what to expect. And additionally, the area of motor vehicle stops and traffic stops is one that was an area of focus in the agency's racial bias audit that was completed in 2019. And so a lot of work has been done in this area to improve data collection and policy. And so the webinar is at 7 p.m. tonight. I believe that we can get a link circulated to you all if you haven't received it. If you'd like to register, you click on that link and the registration takes a couple seconds. However, it also will be recorded and available on the city website after the presentation. So I can make sure that you all receive information about that if you're not able to attend this evening. But just to give you a rundown of some of the topics that will be covered, we'll begin with an address from the chief, who will talk about the agency's goals with motor vehicle stops and where he sees the agency going. Then we will have a presentation by Patrol Captain Jason Bruder, who's going to define what motor vehicle stops are, why the police department conducts these enforcement activities. Then we're going to talk about the policy at the Charleston Police Department and give motorists and their passengers some information about what to expect if they are stopped. We'll go into some tips for motorists to help them feel more at ease if they are pulled over. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the documentation that comes with each stop, what information is recorded, and how the police department uses that information. And we will be able to talk a little bit more about some of our efforts in the future and where we're going to help reduce crime and protect public safety, and also make sure that we're being as fair as possible and how we implement motor vehicle stops. Then we're going to have a 10-minute period or so for anyone that's attending to ask questions for the panelists to answer. So I am happy at this time to, I will pass around a notepad that if you're interested in attending and you haven't received an invite with the registration link, you can provide me your email address and I'll make sure that I get it to you before the webinar tonight at 7. But barring that, I'll make sure that you guys are all aware about where the recording will be located. So are there any questions? Sure, absolutely. Yes, okay. I am the new Procedural Justice and Research Director at the department. So I have a background in research with the courts. And so policing is a new field for me. I'm learning a lot and I'm coming into the position with the citizen's eyes, but definitely coming to the position focused on improvement and also making sure that we use data to try to implement better policies and practices. And I do believe that the Charleston Police Department is open to making sure that they are achieving excellence in all areas and improving where they need to. So I'm very interested in using the background that I have in research and data analysis to help them achieve that goal. And definitely also interested in continue to work with the Citizen Police Advisory Council and you all and members of the community in any capacity that I can. Yes, sir.
Welcome aboard. What kind of data are they going to be collecting on traffic stops, or like what are you going to be analyzing? I mean, I think I know generally what they keep. I guess I'm wondering what they felt was inadequate based on the results of the racial bias audit, and then what they want to make sure that they're keeping better track of.
Sure. So from my understanding, there were multiple different systems collecting data on traffic stops. And when the auditors came in and tried to make sense and get a comprehensive picture of what information they had, and so they could do robust analyses, they weren't able to link all the data pieces together. And so in 2021, the department started collecting more information using field contact cards to try to get that comprehensive database that can link all the systems together and provide for more robust analysis. And so they've made great strides in that area. And so the next part of the process is to start analyzing the data and see what we can glean from them. You're welcome. Yeah. Yes, yes, sir. Yes. Yep. Yeah, the motor vehicle stops terminology is more comprehensive and accurate, the department believes.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to also welcome you. I think the majority of us have been familiar with the work of Wendy Stiver, who was your predecessor and the first person to hold this position in the city. And so I'm hoping that you're able to, sort of learn from the record that she created and put that to good use. And I do think, there's already been a couple of years of collecting data more uniformly, right? So it's not starting today. It has been going on, and then you're just trying to make it more usable from the formatting and being able to compare it and contrast it or whatever you're actually going to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. And then the other thing I think as a commission here, we should know that Jerry Harris is, I don't think you're an original member of CPAC, but almost an original member of CPAC. So I think you should say a little bit about your role with CPAC and what you've seen them do over the last year or so.
So Citizen Police Advisory Committee was established in 2018. And there was a new cohort added in 2020. I was one of the members appointed by the mayor as one of his 4 appointments to the commission. And I chaired the policy review subcommittee. And in December, I was elected as vice chair of CPAC. So I get to run another meeting. Other questions?
Congratulations.
Wow.
Bring
Yes,
up those horses now in the commission. That's awesome.
I was just gonna say, when we get our emails to you, is there a
Yes.
soft copy of that data card you were referencing? Could be interesting to review that just so we can see what's collected.
By data card, do you mean?
You said You mentioned that they were using some
Oh,
contract forms. in cases
I'd
to-
have to check on that, to see what's available.
It's-
So, yeah, I
If
can
it
definitely
is,
get back to
it'd
you.
be interesting.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that comment.
Other questions or comments? If not, okay.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you.
And will we be able to view, will this session be recorded so we can view it later if we can't see it live?
Yes, sir. We will be recording it and I'll make sure that the Hark manager does receive information to pass on along to everyone so they can, I know it's a very tight, schedule tonight,
Right.
but we'll make sure that we make it available to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. And if that's, I'll go ahead and pass around a notepad in case anybody would like to try to see it tonight. And I'll make sure that you get that invite directly from me before 7 tonight. Okay,
Did you
thank
say-
you all.
Did you say the Bruder was part of the team that was gonna be presenting tonight?
Yes, yes, sir.
Huh, that'll be interesting. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm about to say, is he gonna be broadcasting live from King Street?
Okay, thank you. One of the other things I noted, I believe the Public Safety Committee, on Monday's meeting on Monday, and will be receiving a briefing, as I understand, from the police department on the status of some of the implementation of racial bias audit and some other developments in the department. So it'll be quite a bit of information available, coming shortly. Okay.
And that's the Public Safety Committee of the City
Of the
Council.
City Council, that's correct. That's correct. Thank you, Carol. Item number 6 is the Hark Manager's update. As you know, may have noticed, Adrian is not here. Unfortunately, she contracted COVID, and she's been working feverishly from home. Jason and I did have a conversation. Jason, you want to jump in here?
So I spoke with Adrian. She is feeling better on the mend, but her update in terms of the workshops, this Saturday's workshop is going to be canceled, just due to her illness and some of the logistics getting ready for Saturday. But it's my understanding that the 3:11 and the 4:15 meetings will still be happening, and we might just elongate both of those meetings a little bit. So please mark your calendars. Marie, who's relatively new, please mark your calendars for 3:11 and 4:15. They're basically 2 Saturday workshops. Those are going to continue. And then in terms of the vacancies, Tom Orth will be appointed at our city council meeting on Tuesday, which is Valentine's Day. And also 2 additional folks will be being appointed. I'm sorry, and Marie Del Chapo is also being nominated and will likely be appointed at the 2/28 meeting. And I'm not sure if I stand corrected. Is Jennifer here? I think my understanding, actually, I stand corrected. I believe Tom and Marie will officially be appointed at the 2/28 meeting. Just want to make sure that I stand corrected on that. And then we're also doing on 2/14 next Tuesday night, a recognition of our special commission members. Many of those have opted to follow up and be with us. There's a few that won't be. But if anyone's listening and participated in the special commission, please try to get there on Tuesday night for a special recognition, which will happen at the front end of the meeting. So you're not gonna have to wait 2 or 3 hours to get recognized. It'll happen at the front end. And that's, I believe, the extent of the update from Adrian.
So Adrian also arranged for a meeting for the commissioners, and we all were invited to the core group meeting today.
Yep.
Several has had the opportunity to do that. I think it probably would be appropriate to comment at this time about that experience, any of the members who were present.
Yep.
Could I just ask one follow-up question about the 14th? I thought that was also when we were going to officially make our presentation about our progress report, or is that?
That's on, I believe.
That's
on the
correct.
agenda.
They're both items are on the agenda.
Yeah.
So just for the
So
public.
it's not the special commission people, it's all of us plus. the
Yep.
special.
And that update will also be at the front end of the meeting.
I
Yes.
have the agenda in front of me.
I don't think it's at the front end of the meeting. Just so you know, you're gonna have to feel the same pain that we all feel sitting here for hours and hours. There's no public hearings at night.
Okay.
But
We'll put something out there to debate for an hour.
And I guess chocolate for Valentine's.
Yes.
I believe, I'm looking at the agendas in the communication section. So at least it's early.
I've got it here.
No, I.
Yes. Okay,
It's after citizens participation.
okay, very good.
Sure, you want me to talk about today? The core
Yeah,
group?
any comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, I thought it was amazing to hear some of the progress. So the core group that the city formed when Amber was here was basically almost like an extension of our internal working group. So there's a lot, each department had someone there representing. There's probably about 10, 11, 12 different departments represented today. And for me, it was nice to be able to see that some of the work that we have been doing is aligning to some of the work that they've been doing. And ultimately, both of these groups, the commission as well as the core group, should be working in conjunction over the next couple of years. And I think they're excited. I think they've learned a lot. One of the things, my takeaway was that in terms of being a cohesive group, they don't have to necessarily notice public meetings. So I say that with all due respect, meaning that they're able to have authentic conversations and not worry about some of the external forces, for example. But I thought today's meeting was wonderful, and I was glad to be part of it. So I just want to say thanks to Chloe Stuber, and I can't remember the other staff members that helped organize it. Yes,
Yes, that's correct.
thank you.
Bonnie?
Oh. Jason did a good update on sort of the work part, but I think the interpersonal part was really important. And we got to know each other. I think those of us
Yeah.
who were there a little bit better, and a little bit about the core team members. And I thought it was really powerful. And so I would like to have more opportunities in that, in a setting where we can really get to know each other and have great discussions.
Alvin?
Yeah, and
Carol?
it was Bob and Bonnie and Alvin and Jason and me that were there. So it was a good, majority of us. For me, I was really very pleasantly, I don't know, surprised, but I expected a smaller group. And Jerry asked him the question halfway through that they gave us a very thorough little, rundown of what they've been doing they've had 15 meetings since they were formed in 2021, which I think is pretty remarkable, knowing that they're all, busy and sometimes they just can't organize it. And Amber wasn't there for like 4 or 5 months, maybe longer, before they hired Adrian. But I think that actually was a strong opportunity for them to form this 3-leader, co-leader, like little executive team that seems like they've really gelled, and they are really, making a game plan that I think we should all be proud is actually happening in the city. And so I would hope that we can make more of an effort to bring them, like into a meeting here quarterly or something. They can make a more thorough report of their own deliberations and action steps so that we can learn from. And I know in reading the minutes over again, my comment about when we were deciding about how to do the next set of recommendations, subcommittee studies, or however we're calling it, our little work groups. I made the comment that I do think that we should be going, sort of behind what that group has been working on. And I appreciate that whoever sort of put me in my place about that, in terms of putting it in perspective, that obviously the commission has its own set mandate to be making recommendations that the council can act on. So the two groups aren't interchangeable. But I came away from the meeting today feeling much more, more confident than I did before, that this group is going to give us some really good stuff to chew on and make happen, whether we have to bring it to council or not. So I just thought it was a very positive experience, and they seem to be very jazzed about having us there too.
Yeah, so I guess for me, what I took away from, I actually wrote down the word voluntold, right? Because, when we were learning about the group and how they got together, they said that many of them were actually voluntold. Which meant that, yeah, there were probably some hearts that were in it. And then there were probably some hearts that came kicking and screaming. But at the end of the day, just to see the amount of synergy and energy there, I had to do a little bit of, self-reflection and inspection myself driving home because of how I've approached this commission, and how we came out of the special commission. Just seeing that sometimes it is just a function of getting people in the room and just creating some type of community to give folks the opportunity to change. I know you appreciate that, Jason. But yeah, I thought that was awesome. It's definitely going to make me look at this group and this work, just a little bit differently, and just hoping, 15 months down the road that we're at the same place where those folks are. So yeah, that's what I took from it.
I just thought it was a very productive meeting, and getting to meet the folks that work for the city was tremendously valuable. That was a great opportunity.
I concur. One of the things that is included in our report is a recommendation that all departments have a participant in that core group. And I think our experience today suggested that really would be valuable in terms of moving forward. And I think there is, in fact, an interface with some of the recommendations from the internal review. All right. If we pick some of that up and work with them, with the core group closely, I think we'll be able to see some movement in that direction, similar to what we're going to see in economic empowerment, working on the transportation projects. Okay.
Hard, working hard.
Yes. Working hard is a watchword. Item number 7. Jason, you want to kick off that conversation?
Sure. So we had, I believe, 3 additional centers working from special commission, one of history and culture, general review, and I believe youth and education is still out there. Is that correct? Just want to make sure I'm being accurate. We've decided to focus on the next 2, which is history and culture and internal review, and really divide those up just like we did that first go around. So my question, I guess, for discussion is, how do we want to tackle this? Do we want to break up into 2 separate groups? Do we want to do this as a larger team and focus on one and then pivot to the other? I thought the 2 separate groups meeting was probably the most effective, but I'm up for discussion from the group.
So it's coming as a recommendation.
Yes.
That we take history and culture and internal review as the next 2 sections of the special commission report that we review and comment on. That's a recommendation.
And that we do it as 2 groups. That's your
2 groups.
suggestion.
Yeah, two groups.
One large group, 2 different.
Yeah, that's the other option. Is option 1 is 2 groups. We divide up this team into 2 groups, and we hit history and culture. Another group hits internal review, or we do this as a discussion maybe during this meeting. Even we could do that and hit history and culture, and then get that completed, and then pivot to internal review. Mike, you had a question or comment?
Quick question, just if someone could brief, at least me, if not all of us, internal review encompasses, what is the spectrum of?
Sure,
internal
Jerry,
review?
you were probably most. No.
Okay.
Because I could take.
You can get back to me. if that's
No,
okay.
I'll take.
I got an answer. if Jerry does. Yeah.
Yes, the internal review subcommittee focused on operational procedures within the department's human resources kind of related matters, training across departments, like retention, promotion situations. I think there was even some commentary about budget.
Yep.
Budget allocation. So it's those kind of things, departments working in silos, that perhaps there should be some additional collaboration. And one of the things that we've all experienced, and that will be important, is the IT backbone in order to be able to share communication.
Sign me up for that one.
So that was a lot of,
I'm very interested in that one.
yeah, there was a lot of internal workings and how the departments spoke with each other, connected with each other. And New school board member, Mr. Darren Calhoun, chaired that internal review, I believe.
That's good. Yes, you did.
If my memory serves me correctly. So, yeah. Yes.
As a new member, it would be helpful to just hear if we broke up into two groups and tackled these two different areas. What are we doing, in these areas? What's our charge, of each of the two groups?
So the first go around, we basically assigned whoever was in that group. So let's just use the example of economic opportunity, economic empowerment that Alvin chaired for the special commission. And then did you take the lead for this? So you can chime in if you want, but basically looking at the recommendations that were in the special commission report, prioritizing, having a discussion on all those recommendations, and prioritizing them in some sort of list. And then basically, I don't know if you guys removed some, took some off.
No.
So if I try.
Good.
The charge of the subcommittees was one, to review the recommendations of the special commission subcommittees, comparing it to the master plan to identify whether or not there was intersection.
Right.
The city adopted master plan because that was already city policy. A second component, if there were things that council had moved on already, or the administration had moved on, to note those, right? So we had a sense of where we were on any of the recommendations, right? And then for those recommendations that we thought should move forward, to identify which of the standing committees of city council it should be referred to for action.
Okay, makes sense. Gets a little confusing, I know. So.
I was asleep when you said, so we have 3 more to discuss, to study and get started on that same process. I mean, I think I'm on the record that we're not done with economic empowerment. I would think, maybe the transportation and housing still needs to have, some more fleshing out, but we also have health disparities in environmental justice. We haven't put that on our to-do list, so we're not
Quite there yet.
excusing ourselves from that responsibility, right?
So Carol, are you making a suggestion or motion to finalize the first group? Since I'm hearing that your first go around with the hasn't been completed yet.
I mean, if we can only do it linearly, yes, then I would think maybe we should circle back with the groups that we worked on
Okay.
in order to get to our progress report deadline. I mean,
Okay.
am I wrong, Alvin, in terms of?
So what I thought we were doing was making the report to city council. All right, have the recommendations and priorities submitted to council, right? And then we would monitor what they were doing. All right, and working with the core groups, and Adrian, all right, be able to see what was moving. If there was a need for additional research or support for a particular recommendation. And we had the bandwidth to identify where those resources were, or if we had it within our capacity to do that, we would do that. Using the rapid transit project as an example, there's an item where there's specific activities related to impacting ideas that were in the report around mobility, the potential of impacting housing, all right, and their resources and their plans being developed currently around that. So the degree to which we monitor or get directly involved, the chairman of the transportation group is sitting with us. He's committed conversations with the staff who's responsible for outreach, right? We can kind of build an action plan around that. Some of the other areas, there may not be that kind of resource, and we just wind up tracking. So yeah, we're not just sending the stuff to city council, making the recommendations and going on, and not continuing to monitor what's going on, if that's your concern. Karen.
That isn't my concern. I mean, I don't feel like we have actually submitted anything that you could say are recommendations to council. We've submitted our progress report, which for the working group that I was part of
Okay.
to focus on economic empowerment, and a lot of our conversation in that meeting sort of recognized that economic empowerment, has to deal with stuff and wherewithal and how you build, a person's success in business and having a more stable home life by, more stable housing prices, whatever. So I think that we danced around the opportunities that the city has to bring a lot of these improvements to the disparities with the low line is one great example. The Low Country Rapid Transit is another. We talked about what's going to go on between all the housing authorities, RAD redevelopment, especially around Gadsden Green and West Edge. So we talked about how those are real timeline, hopefully big undertakings that are going to require the kinds of public-private partnerships that we know we're going to have to tap into in order to improve the situations here on whatever topic we're talking about. But we have not taken the economic empowerment list apart and said, these are our 3 things that we want to make sure the council never lets go of. I thought that was going to be what we would continue to work on as a working group. So.
Well, so Carol, I think before we get there, I think it's only fair for the rest of for history and culture in internal review and health and disparities that we go through that same exercise.
Yeah, that would
we
be
did
fine.
with the-
I think that's, as long as we recognize that we're not really done
Mhm.
in terms of delivering a final report
Of course.
to the council.
I'm not saying that we're done. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that we should give these other items,
Yeah, that makes
the
sense.
same as we did with the first 3. So at least see if these 3 items align with the city master plan. Right? And then once we say yay or nay, and then we come back to the first 3 topics.
Yeah, and
and
I
just
think
dive into
maybe
those a
the
little
reason
bit
that we picked the 3 that we did first is we knew that there was alignment, or at least places where we would expect alignment for the topics that we've already begun to study. I don't think there's a lot about history and culture in our master plan. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't think there's a lot about internal review. I don't think there's a lot about health and welfare in terms of matching with the recommendations that those topics were given, a year and a half ago. So, yeah, I totally agree. We should get to a place where at least we've got some work, to be done on the other. I think it's 4 areas, right? We had 7
Yeah.
topics. We're going to
And
table youth and ed.
youth and education is the 4th.
We're going to table youth and ed, but we should put health and
No, we're not
welfare.
not going to table. We just have it at the back end.
Well, I mean, yeah, we're
It's
not
at the
going to work
back
on
end.
it
It's
right
not
now.
tabled.
Okay, sorry.
And
We're not going to.
to Alvin's point, we have an obligation to do all of them. All right, at the consensus so far of the group in terms of tackling it, the education and youth pieces at the back end.
Right, I
So-
used the wrong word, not table it forever, but to do it later. But I do think that health and welfare needs to be up there with the other 2 that are on our list right now.
I'll turn off so you can turn off, then I'll turn back on.
I was just gonna say, I was thinking there was another, which was the youth and education. So so it looks kind of like we've got 2, and then we'll have another 2 to do the same process with, because I think we're gonna have I would hope we're gonna have a lot of overlap with city plan once we get into youth and education. I mean, I don't know, but that seems to be, I consider it important. So that's all I was gonna say.
Thank you. So I'm a little bit lost on the genesis of this conversation, but I think I get that it was sort of how we're going to go through each one of these topics and get recommendations and then package them back together and bring them to city council, which I do think, by the way, is the right thing to do. And I heard the word someone earlier say silo. I don't like that word, but the whole idea that we've compartmentalized some of these things that have natural overflow is important to note. And I just want to for the record and for this group, because I wasn't around at the genesis of all of this when you all worked so hard through the first iteration of all the recommendations, but it seems to me, I mean, it's not lost on me that housing and mobility were lumped together. And for very much intentionally and very much rightly so, particularly if we're focusing on, among other things, the largest scale project we've ever seen in South Carolina, Low Country Rapid Transit, which enormous amount of the resources we're putting towards that have nothing to do with mobility in and of itself. It has to do with how mobility interacts with the needs, wants, and desires of a community, right? And I look, and internal review really caught my ear, particularly when you described what internal review was. One of the things that has always stuck in my craw ever since I was elected to city council and has never left is the fact that we in the city very much compartmentalize our departments. And when we talk about internal review, I heard a lot about process, but I didn't hear a lot about, or anything with all due respect, about structure. And we as a city have really operated in the same governmental structure without much change, without much substantive change for 47 years, 47 years. And here's the example I want to use. Our Department of Traffic and Transportation and our planning department are not aligned. They're not together. And physically, they are separated by as much land on the peninsula as exists to put between two departments. And if you think about what we do in the city when it comes to mobility and traffic and transportation, it is, if not 100%, that might be an exaggeration, but it is at least 98.5% a function of planning. We don't pave roads, we don't build roads, but we do a lot of planning and strategizing. So those two departments naturally, to me, not only should be communicating better, should have some natural alliance, if not be merged. So those are the kind of things I think that we on this commission can have some influence over. And then when you talk about health disparities, and one of the things that we look at all the time, we see the map is the health by zip code. Again, it goes back to access, mobility, housing, and how we deal with all that. So I like the idea of going through all these topics and subjects, but then sort of looking back again. And when the recommendations come, they can cross the boundaries of these particular subtopics and bleed together to make some recommendations that I think council needs to hear, and whether they want to hear it or not, I think when they do, they will want to hear it. So I'm going to keep a really close eye on this internal review subject when it comes to some of the recommendations that this commission is going to bring to city council, because we need to have the internal structure to be able to deal with it. Does that make any sense at
Yeah.
all?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I agree with handling it that way, where it's kind of broken into these small parts, and then we'll all have a chance to take a look back at what we thought was important from each of those small parts, and then what we really need to delve back into. I mean, because to me, one of the biggest issues we've got in the city right now is housing. I mean, I'm not plowing any new ground there. But I think we have an opportunity to make a series of recommendations to city council that is going to take a whole lot more looking into. And we can circle back and do that. But that could, I mean, radically change affordability in this city. And I think that would be such an important legacy for this commission to put that stuff forward, that it's good that, you know, that's sort of been done now. It's going to be before us in the future, get some more things before us, and then we can really drill down onto the huge topics that we want to tackle, which I think that's probably one of them.
So
I just want to support Mike in saying that I don't think the subcommittee, as I, observed them during the special commission report process, felt empowered to do the kinds of, moving things around on the checkerboard that you're suggesting. So I think that's a very positive way of giving us an example here in the current day HARC on how we can, like you said, take things apart and put it back together for the real life opportunities that we actually have as a municipality. And so I'm excited about all of it.
Okay, so we are at the point of trying to reach a conclusion, a consensus or moving forward on the history and culture and internal review. Understanding that we're going to take on the other, it seemed what I saw from nodding of heads, we're going to split ourselves in two. And one set of us will work on history and culture, the other set will work on internal review. Give ourselves a 45-day timeframe for those recommendations to come back and report back to the whole body. And if in fact we need more time or to become more granular, right, we'll make that decision at that time.
Just to set that expectation for my fellow commissioners, that does require a separate meeting in addition to this meeting. So what they would do is schedule a Zoom. I'm not sure how it worked, but that seemed to work well, just to schedule a separate Zoom. So I just want to make sure we're clear on the expectation that it's not going to happen during this meeting. It's going to be a separate.
At least, and there was a certain level of frustration that the time schedule that we had for getting the progress report done. I'm certain from my conversation with members of the commission that it might have wanted to be a little bit more granular, right, than we were able to in the time frame we had. So while we're not facing the same 2-month time frame, we need to, in fact, have a set expectations for ourselves, all right, and use this time wisely. And when we get the reports back, progress reports, assessment back from subcommittees, what we need from those of us who were not on that subcommittee, right, or some thoughts about, I've got this question, I want, why aren't we talking about this? Why isn't that there? We may not decide to include that, but at least those thoughts can be raised. Bonnie, I see you.
I am just wondering if we could take a quick survey of who might want to serve on which thing, so we have an idea where we are. So
Okay, well, let's just start moving around the table. Carol?
I would lean a little toward internal review, but actually both are interesting to me. But if I had my choice, I'd go internal review.
See you?
I would say history and culture, but I'll probably pop in and check out the internal review conversation because I share Mike's interest in it for sure.
I'm a little weak on how the city's organized, but I did study for the Charleston tour guide exam years ago and was appalled at that volume. Yeah, I think history and culture.
Okay, great. Mike?
I think it'll be no surprise where I want to go.
Okay.
Internal review.
Okay, Bonnie?
history and culture.
Alan?
What's the count so far, thus far, Mr.?
We're five to two.
5-2 leaning towards and.
History and culture.
Leaning towards history and culture.
Yeah.
More on.
Okay, internal review. I've always wanted to work with Mike Seekings.
Now we're talking.
Now, I'm suggesting the co-chair be silent at this time, because we ain't gonna have to do both. No, we have to do both.
I'll do internal review.
Okay.
I was a history major, but I can be a kibitzer on that. topic.
Okay, so we're at 4-4. And we have Marie and Tom coming on board. Okay, and the two co-chairs will work with Adrian to pop in and kind of see what's going on and kind of help stir the pot. Right? Great. Wonderful.
Adrian.
Yeah. Mhm. Let's do that.
I'm happy to volunteer on the internal review to be the
Okay,
liaison with Adrian to get it scheduled.
okay,
We're gonna do it via Zoom, just,
okay.
that's okay with
So
everybody.
Mike will be the initial straw. All right, on history and culture, anyone want to raise their hand to be lead stir on that? Okay. None is,
I did it last time, so I was holding back.
okay. I mean, and again, in terms as we're, you know, as we're growing, you know, as we're growing, and learning each other's skill sets. I mean, it is good to have different folks doing different pieces. It's great. Okay, Co-chair Saccharin requested that we have a conversation about the Memphis experience, and what that might mean, how it might reflect. You want to kick that off?
Thanks, Jerry. I guess to start, I just want to frame where my head is. Certainly, don't want to use the tragedy or something inappropriate or fake or inauthentic. I think it's important, particularly for this group, to hear from the expertise, the knowledge, the life experiences that we have around the table, to dissect, ask questions, particularly ask questions that you may have thought and didn't have the courage to ask or weren't sure how to ask. And the reason I'm saying this is I received several emails from constituents over the past couple of weeks with I would consider valid questions. And certainly watching that video was very painful for me, and I couldn't imagine for others how painful it is. And I know several friends, white and black, that said they chose not to watch the video. The emails that I received, I think, are important to have that discussion, and at least in this body, try to have authentic, honest discussion. One of the emails I received called me out for my participation during the social unrest that we had in June of 2020, where I protested in the afternoon, asking me why I wasn't out protesting and why Black Lives Matter was not out protesting. And they insinuated it was because it was 5 African-American officers. And I'm going to be quite honest, as a 50-year-old white man that hasn't experienced having the talk with your child, African-American child, about what happens when you get pulled over, I really couldn't answer that question. I did have a good conversation with Jerry as we led into this, but I think it's worthy of a discussion, and if nothing comes of tonight, then nothing comes of it. But I do think that the purpose of this commission is to have some of these honest discussions, at least start having these honest discussions. So for me, the big question was that dynamic. And Jerry, you explained it to me, pretty well, but I would love to hear from others about that question that I received from at least 2 constituents. Where was the outrage? Is it because they were African-American police officers? And then I've also heard concerns that the timeliness and the urgency that folks were arrested is also a dynamic that I think needs to be discussed. So anyways, I think this is an opportune time to have that conversation. And if you don't feel comfortable, then you don't feel comfortable. But I feel like this is the opportunity and the purpose of why we're here. So.
First, before I get started, I just want to make it known that I'm a Black person. I'm not Black people. So I'm speaking for myself whenever I make these statements. I didn't watch the video either. I can't watch the video. After it gets to a certain point, you have to make a decision if, I just wanted to protect my mental health at that point going forward. Why you didn't see the outrage, I would hope that it had something to do with the swift action and response to what these 5 people did to this young man. But it kind of takes me back. I did an interview for the Post-Courier a couple of weeks after the George Floyd incident. I don't know if you guys got a chance to read it, but it's probably still out there somewhere. But as a young African-American male, attending the Citadel, doing what I'm supposed to do on full scholarship, engineering major, to have been pulled over for failure to signal while changing lanes. And then you end up with multiple police cars and a paddy wagon And now you're doing a slow walk with the guns drawn to your back with the dog jumping through your car without any explanation outside of failure to change lanes. Situations like this, the George Floyd, the Tyree Nichols situation, it is a trigger that takes you to a place that you don't want to go again. It's a feeling that you don't want to have to experience again. And then it also just puts it into a certain perspective that both of my situations could have ended differently, right? So that is the protection of my mental health component that I'm speaking about. Me personally, I don't want to go to that dark space. But however, I do understand that I still carry this burden of Blackness, even though I'm a Black person and not Black people. I'm still out there and available for conversations to be able to ask and answer, to be able to answer questions based off of my own personal experience to the best that I can. Because part of the burden of Blackness is understanding that even though you might not want to represent an entire group of people, you still do. And you may be one of the few and many interactions that a person that may look like y'all may have with me. So definitely take advantage of those opportunities. But it's just these instances happen far too frequently. But like I said, I do commend the police department in their swift response. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. And hopefully, you know, this is a lesson learned as to how you can avoid civil unrest. That's what justice looks like. That's what the process of justice looks like. That's what the outcry has always been. The outcry has always been justice, right? The process of justice. We just want to have equal protection under the law at the end of the day. So those are my 2 cents at the end of the day. And just keep in mind, if there's anything that you take from my comments, is that, you know, the individual that you're talking to is an individual and not an entire group of people at the end of the day. And it's just kind of, I don't know, just looking at the whole demographics and the makeup of this room, we sit on a Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Commission, and there's only 2 Black people in the room. Taking nothing to get away from anybody else in the room. I'm glad that you guys are here. But you know, it's just, in order for us to be able to make progress and like get past some of these issues, like we have to be open and honest and be willing to get uncomfortable. So that's, sorry, it may seem like I was kind of all over the place, but it's a very tough subject matter to actually talk about at the end of the day.
So if I'm being asked to give you advice about what to say back to your constituents, one, I will echo very clearly what Alvin said in terms of response. The collective response was listening to the parents say, let's give the system a chance to work. The movement, the firing, the indictments, all gave space, right? The notion of outrage, how outrage is expressed, it can be done in different forms, all right? And perhaps folks need to understand people mourn in a different way. People respond to trauma in different fashions. Because you don't see it does not mean that there's not that passion. Another way of looking at it is that portion of the African descendant community in Memphis, which has had tremendous racial trauma over time, chose to say, we're not going to respond. We're not going to ask the rest of the community to respond. We're going to give the system a chance. Right? That's a perspective that one might take. Legal action. The notion that folks will, you know, those 5 officers in the police department probably will be sued civilly. All right. In addition to the criminal activity. Folks are saying, let's give the system a chance to live up to what it says it's going to be one more time. right? As opposed to responding in a different fashion. I think folks think the George Floyd situation got people's attention, put in place some procedural changes. And folks just like school integration, right? And all those things that have occurred. Still giving the system a chance to move and live up to the words, or what we interpret the words as saying in terms of justice for all, equal protection and the like. So that's again, just my take. And I appreciate you asking for advice and counsel, all right? And in a public setting, but know that takes energy, right? Even to respond to this, right? Steve?
Jason, thanks for bringing this up, and thank you all both for your perspectives. I think, and I have not watched this video, not out of some principled reason or even to protect my own mental health. I was just busy at work, but I think that is, illustrates that honestly I didn't think that deeply about it, and obviously, people have to, and when these things happen. But I think to me, this illustrated both progress and the distance that the police departments still need to travel in terms of getting to where we need them to be to ensure equal justice under the law. I sort of had two big takeaways. Number one, these incidents are the outlier. Most negative police interactions do not end in somebody dying. That when they do, I think we should take that opportunity to see how we got there, right? These officers were part of a unit called the Scorpion Unit or something stupid. I see this, and I'll just be frank, because I see this all the time and it infuriates me. There are departments in our community, not the Charleston Police Department, because if I saw it, I would call it out. But there are departments in our community that have similar names, that have these wild logos, and they view themselves as, the only line of defense between civilization and chaos. They act like they're going to Fallujah when they are meant to be policing our communities. And these types of units, this type of mentality, it creates everyday routine injustices that we'll never see on the news, that I see on body camera video, that my clients and their families and their friends know all too well, have experienced all of their lives. And it produces a deep, deep mistrust. It makes us unsafe as a community because it makes people all less likely to believe that police will help them, as opposed to using them and then hanging them out to dry at some point along the line. And then I'll just add that, the initial report in this incident was dishonest. It was an outright lie. It was written in extremely passive language that I will tell you is very common in policing in this country. You go to law school, you learn not to write in the passive voice. You go to the police academy, you learn to write exclusively in the passive voice. That has a way of shielding the person who does a particular thing from being held responsible for doing that thing. Personally, I think that's something that should change. It allows a culture to fester where, oh, this happened, not somebody did it. this person was hurt. Not a cop beat this person to death. Seems to me that the bigger the investigation, the more passive the language gets. So just, just some very clear things that I see that still need to change. And thank God somebody took another look at what happened here, found other camera angles, found, somebody videoing it, and realized that a crime had been committed here by a lot of people. Nobody stepped in to stop it. And so they allowed it. And they did quickly bring justice, but that doesn't solve the problem that led to this. And so I don't want that to get lost in the conversation. We should be happy to see that, there wasn't this, rush to defend people who clearly did the wrong thing. But there was a culture that allowed that to happen, and that's still going to change.
Jerry, I want to,
Right there.
that was my first thought, Stephen. I mean, my first thought as a human being was that, once again, I have no right or opportunity to even, stand in any place, because as a waking up white woman of privilege, it's just too hard to go there, as much as my heart bleeds for people that, put themselves out on TV. The mom who said, she's having to understand that God had given him his assignment and it was over. And so watching all of that as a person, it's just too hard to think about the pain that we can't really share. But I do think that, what Jerry said first, and then you've made really clear, Stephen, is that in this case, the fact that the baseline justice that we should all expect and be mad as hell if we don't get it as quickly as we did here, in this case, it came forward. And so I do hope that that's a new level of expectation that we can all share in as a community. And I think that that's a place where HARC and the groups like us, can be demanding of our authorities. That's the baseline. But then, because that happens so quickly, I do think that we should see that we have an opportunity then to pursue the greater, issues that you were just speaking of, Stephen, that this system is still rotten based on the way that people take it on for their own egos, their own, strokes, and whatever societal upbringing that they've been led to think that they can have that kind of power over somebody's life. So, I think, again, this should be something that we can be asking of our, what's the JCCC, whatever that committee is that, operates on all of the issues that around the county, the region, and maybe make a list of things that this is the baseline. We're really glad that they happened here, and we want to use, because that doesn't have to be the battle cry of people who want justice. We can go on to this other segment of stuff that hardly ever makes the light of day, because we're still dealing with, are the officers going to be punished, and is, light going to shine in on what really happened? Go on to the rottenness and the just the whole sense of empowerment that people have, and in wrong aspects of their power, their authority. So I can't really express it very well, but I do think that it's sort of like opening up another lane of clarity and opportunity to make change in the things that you were just talking about.
I would like to speak, Alvin, to your discussion of the racial makeup of the committee. And I think I would prefer there were more Black voices on this commission as well. I also think there's an advantage to the makeup that we have. and it is what we have. And the advantage is, you know, in a situation like Tyree Nichols' death and, you know, all of the ones that have come before it. If you're white, you have the option to do that labor or not. And if you're Black, you don't have the option to do that labor because it comes to you, you feel it. And so I hope that those of us on this commission who are white will do the labor that we don't have to do, but that we have the opportunity to do, and take some of the labor off of our Black brothers and sisters, but that we also are always listening and trying to find out more and understand more.
Yeah, Jason, I want to, I think, reinforce, especially one point that Jerry made, and that was, I think, probably two main factors, and Darren too, the swift justice that happened, you know, with the officers that were involved, that was critical, I think. The family, the mother and the family asking for everyone to give time, like Jerry said, you know, to let the system do what it's supposed to do. And, you know, I did see snippets of it, and it's horrible. And for me, you know, the first question that I, you know, asked myself is, how in the world can a human being be this evil? Even those that came up after, you know, and basically, you know, I don't know if they were called or just came upon it or whatever, but it was terrible. And for me, I asked myself, you know, how could a human being do this? And I think to myself, if we as human beings are filled with good, there is no room for evil. So I think what we have to ask ourselves is, how do we become filled with good and leave no room for evil?
As a psychologist, I have some thoughts about that idea of good and evil. One of the things I think that people don't realize about us as humans is that we are very much products of our environment, and we're influenced by other people in a way that we don't realize that we're influenced by other people. And so I don't think that those men who beat Tyree Nichols and kicked him to death, I don't think that they were evil. I think what they did was horrible. But I think what they did is a product of the environment that they're in policing. Right. And if you demonize people, then you miss what's going on in the system, right? It would be really easy to say, well, those are some evil police officers. We just need to get rid of those. That is not the solution.
Yeah, it's like kind of like saying, I mean, if we're products of our environment, and if there's an issue, and if we keep focusing on the product, the environment's still there. It's just going to keep producing the same product. So I agree with you 100% on that, Bonnie. Yeah, we need to focus on the environment of policing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I was just going to say it for how we can think about our own city and our own community. You know, we need to be looking at the racial bias audit of our police department and how far we've come along, because whether the officers are Black, white, brown, they're in the system and they're being formed by that system. And we as a body need to be examining that critically.
I pointed out to that actually, we know that this evening the chief will be opening the session. Originally, that wasn't going to happen. All right, that's a byproduct of the Tyree Nichols assassination. In addition, the question as to whether or not, when the Public Safety Committee meets next Tuesday, the degree to which questions around implementation, the speed of implementation, and the measures that the department is looking at as it relates to disparate treatment, which may not be the result of bias, but it is disparate. And how do you addressing that becomes important in terms of the conversation that the Public Safety Committee needs to be having should be having with the department. It's going to be, we should watch that and use this as a learning moment for us in terms of how we do our work in terms of moving forward in terms of systemic change, right, or changing the environment. Mike, you have anything on this?
My grandfather was one of the wisest men I ever knew and one of the smartest men. Every now and then would do a lot of listening, and I'm going to do a lot of listening on this one.
So any additional comments?
My last comment is, I do want to acknowledge Eldon's point about the makeup of the commission. And I think not acknowledging that as chair, co-chair, that is something that I have thought about personally. And I guess I would just slightly disagree with you, Bonnie, about our role as some of the white commissioners. Ultimately, what I've seen through the special commission and my work is this comes down to power. And our ability as a community to recognize that I'm willing to give up some power. So as long as this commission is made up a majority of white folks, to me, that still denotes that we, and I say we, as a community, are unwilling to let go of the power. I don't have an answer to that. So part of this is a challenge for us as we mature as a commission to make sure that we could increase the voices, not just African-American voices, but female voices on the commission as well. I mean, this is a commission about diversity and inclusion. Right. But also one of the things we missed with our special commission, it's not just racial diversity and gender diversity, but sexual orientation. We've missed a lot of this. So as we build out and as we mature, I think this is something to keep in the back of our mind, but I just want to let, for the record, fully aware of the makeup.
When we talk about structural racism, one of the things we're talking about is that power and what maintains power, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with individual bias. It has to do with how a system is structured. And so when you structure the commission so that there is somebody from each district on the commission, it creates a structural bias because neighborhoods are segregated. And when my councilman Ross Appel called me and said, will you serve on this commission? I immediately said yes. And he was a little taken aback because apparently they have to beg a lot of times. And then I said, wait, hold on. I think this should be a Black woman, in this place, not me. And he said, our district is 97% white. And so we've created in the structure of how commissioners are appointed to this commission, something that creates a bias. And that's structural.
And to me, that is a reminder that we cannot police our way to a safer Charleston, right? I mean, we can't put enough police on the streets. I was struck by the mountain of data that Adrian sent me as a new commission member, the tying of being a resilient community with diversity, that those two things were linked. And I think we do need to be thinking about diversity and inclusivity and representation at every level, because that is going to also go a long way to creating the kind of holistic and integrated Charleston that we need, I think, to be a more safe and healthy city. It's not about just like how many police can we put on the streets, right? Which I think is sometimes the knee-jerk reaction. That's not always going to be the right solution.
Thank you for a interesting conversation. I think we got to know a little bit about how we observe and share. I would point out that the genesis of the commission started out of the apology for slavery, not an analysis of gender issues, not an analysis of sexual orientation issues, but the lack of work being done to address the apology for slavery. Our conversation and even the name of the commission speaks to, again, the question of power, right? And that centrally putting at the center of the work the question of the legacy of enslavement, Jim Crow, and the like, and what can the city do to ameliorate, eliminate, okay, those vestiges in the interest of moving forward to be the most productive, successful, and wonderful place to live that everybody in the city wants. And I think it's important, the conversation about the composition. We start from where the conversation started to where we are now, thus speak to should be seen as a measure of progress or lack thereof as we move forward. So I think it's good that we put that on the record and had that conversation and trying to determine how we can use our power and responsibility to move that forward, to change that dynamic is something that I think comes to the fore from this conversation for me, and I appreciate it. Is there anything else any commissioner would like to bring before the body? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order. Move second, undebatable. We're done.